Hey guys, it's Miss Pearson, and I just wanted to take you along on a little virtual tour of a historic site that I visited over the weekend. Since we're studying the beginning of the Civil War this week, and since we have this really cool antebellum former cotton plantation within an hour's drive of Spartanburg that was the home of the governor of South Carolina immediately before South Carolina seceded from the Union after the election of President Lincoln. I thought we would have a little virtual field trip, if you will. I know it's not as great as actually going on a field trip, but it's the best I can do at the moment. Okay, so also, since we have been studying slavery in this antebellum period, I thought it would be a good idea to show you the kind of home that would have been attached to a cotton plantation. So this is Rose Hill Plantation Historic Site. It's located in Union County, and it was the home of William Henry Gist and 178 enslaved people who lived and worked on this plantation. So what's interesting about this historic site is that this mansion and the kitchen are original structures, as are these huge magnolia trees. We believe these trees were planted around 1850, so these are original to the home. This plantation originally sat on about 2,000 acres of land, so this was a very large and profitable cotton plantation. It was named Rose Hill after the rose gardens that were cultivated around the home. So the site was acquired by the National Park Service. They actually got it in an effort to stop the erosion that was created from all the cotton farming. Cotton is a plant that uses a lot of water. So in a lot of these places where you had cotton plantations, you would have a good amount of erosion there as well. But it's been a historic site since the 1960s, but Rose Hill was an active cotton plantation both before and after the Civil War for around 128 years. Here you see the loom house. Now this is a reproduction, but I still wanted to show you guys the large loom that would have been in there. So any plantation of this size would have had a loom house, and you would have had people who would work to make fabric, to make clothes there on the plantation for the workers. So I want to give you a little bit of background on William Henry Gist. He was elected governor of South Carolina in 1858, and he served until just before South Carolina seceded from the Union. So literally the day he left office was the day of the secession convention, and he signed the ordinance of secession as a convention member, and you'll see a copy of that in a minute. So from the time that Gist took office, he was already rallying people for this cause of secession. He wrote to all the cotton states except Texas to inform them of the likelihood that South Carolina would withdraw from the Union and to request their cooperation. He also kept the state legislature in special session to await the outcome of the 1860 presidential election, proposing that a convention be called and the militia strengthened in the event that Abraham Lincoln was elected, which, as we know, he was. So we're inside the parlor room right now, and in this very room, this would have been an area where these conversations would have taken place, where he would have, brought in other politicians and talked about South Carolina seceding from the Union and what was going to happen if, you had a Republican president. Because you remember that the Republican Party, only 6 years old by the time that Abraham Lincoln is elected president, this had been a party that was created with the intention of ending slavery. So as we kind of look around this room, I slowed it down a little bit. This tour was super crowded on Saturday, but I wanted you to see this painting above the fireplace. That is William Henry Gist and his wife here in this parlor room. Gist also, even though he was the governor of South Carolina, he didn't make his money in politics. So during this time period, that's seen as more of like a public service. He made his money from cotton. He was also an attorney. It was prestigious to be in public service because these offices, they were only held by like wealthy men. So, you're in the 1850s, not many people are allowed to even be involved in politics. So, for example, in Union County in the 1850s, around 60% of the population was African American. Most of those were enslaved. So, of the 40% of the population that were white, women, of course, were not allowed to vote. And there were also property restrictions for white males to be able to participate in politics. So overall, you've got a very small number of people who are making decisions for the state. The Gist family was just one of these wealthy Southern families who were really, really political. So you'll see this picture above the fireplace here. This was a cousin of William Henry Gist, and I'm not making this up. This man's name was States Rights Gist. He died during the Civil War in a battle in Tennessee, but literally they named this man States Rights Gist, which just kind of shows you how political this family was and how committed to these Southern causes that they were. Okay, so moving on. What I really enjoyed about this tour is that the NPS did this great job of highlighting the lives of the enslaved people who lived there. There are detailed records of all the enslaved people that included their names, age, skills, and unfortunately how much they estimated to be worth. So I'm going to go back to that in just a second. Right now we're looking at probably what was the master bedroom of the Gist mansion. They believe that this furniture may have been there from the time that they lived there. I'm also going to talk about like the perspective of how much wealth this family had and how lucrative cotton was to these people that relied on slave labor. This is from the balcony. You can see the kitchen cabin right there, right kind of at the back door of the house. And your enslaved people would have entered through the back door. We know that there was a 25-year-old woman who was the cook of the family. She lived in the kitchen cabin with her young son. We also know that there were 2 to 3 teenagers who would have been involved in serving the food and would have also have heard a lot of what was being talked about in this home. Now you're in the ballroom and just kind of looking around here. So you see plenty of space in this mansion. Okay, so going back to the wealth and the issue of this wealth. In just a second, you're going to see some records that were kept that kind of show how much that they estimated that the enslaved people were worth. So as horrible as it is to put a price, see there it is. As horrible as it is to put a price on any human soul, this just shows how much wealth these people were making from cotton, and also the buy and sell of human beings. So many of the slaves who are listed on these records were valued at $1,000. So $1,000 in 1858, adjusted to inflation for today, would be around $37,000. So on top of things like white supremacy, this is another reason that slave owners were so desperate to try to find those who tried to escape. There are records that you just saw at Rose Hill of these people with their names and their skills and their race. And there also was someone who had tried to escape. There was an enslaved person named Wyatt, and he tried to escape twice. He was captured both times. And those who helped him get as far as Charlotte, they faced dire consequences. So an enslaved man from another plantation was sentenced to be lashed with a whip 200 times, almost to the point of death, for aiding Wyatt in his attempted escape. So this also shows like the power and influence that William Henry Gist had in this area, that he was able to enforce that type of brutality on a man that wasn't even of his plantation. So here's just a little bit more of the outside of the plantation. And then we went about a mile down the road and we visited, this is the cemetery for the enslaved people. So these graves were marked by fieldstones. Now they have counted over 400 fieldstones in this area, and they've marked them with the little tiny flags that you see there. So they think it's a headstone and a footstone, so that means about 200 people are buried here in this cemetery. Which is also public land that you can, go and visit, and be respectful for, the people who this was their home and their final resting place. And in contrast, this is the Gist family cemetery. This is where William Henry Gist and his wife and his children are buried. So you can see quite a bit different cemetery from the last one, with these large type monuments. So hopefully you enjoyed this kind of short tour.